Let's go. Let's get right into it. Let's go. Episode 535, Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. Now let's just get right to it. What Tucker and Vivek are talking about in this clip, what you're about to see is Vivek breaking down the woke ideology so well and poking some major holes in the belief system and likening it to cult and religious aspects, and just very intelligent, this breakdown that he does. I think you're going to find it really, really interesting. And the reason that he's doing this is because Tucker Carlson saw what Vivek did in Iowa, where he had an interaction with a pansexual lady, young lady, very civil lady, and he gave her such a well thought out answer and left this lady, for lack of a better term, just like deer in the headlights kind of thing. That's what I'm about to show you right now, just to give you some context into what him and Tucker are talking about. Because I did play this clip yesterday in a video where Joe Rogan is asking or talking about how he wants to see Vivek as vice president. But for those of you that haven't seen that, I'm just going to show that to you now, just so you get a little bit of understanding. Here we go. Let's pull that up. Pull her up. Here it is.
I was just wondering, what were your opinions on the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I don't think it's one community.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, how could it be? Just mashed together an alphabet soup. Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, if you ask me. But what's your opinion?
I'm personally pansexual, so I was just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression. And so I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want, and that's fine. But you don't become oppressive by foisting that on others. And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults. And so I think adults are free to make whatever choices they want, but do not foist that ideology onto children before children are in a position as adults to make decisions for themselves. And so I think a lot of the frustration in the country, and if I'm being really honest, that I also share, comes from that new culture of oppression where saying those things can actually get somebody punished. And in my case, it's part of why it's my responsibility to say them. And I respect that you may have a different opinion, and that's okay. It's part of what makes our country great is that you and I can be civil and have this conversation, and that we live in a country that still gives us, each of us, the right to speak to a presidential candidate and back, and still say that we pledge allegiance to the same nation. So I think that's the beauty of our country, and that's my honest opinion.
And then she just says thank you. And like I said, it's a very civil interaction. Very, very civil. And very well thought out. Just great. And Tucker was impressed by it as well. So much so that Tucker wanted to talk to him about this. And right now he's going to give an even more of a breakdown. Because right now, right in that clip, he was trying to be civil with a young lady, as he should be. Not just as a presidential candidate, but as a man. You want to try and be as civil as someone is allowing you to be when you're interacting with them. But now he gives like a more, I don't want to say hardcore breakdown, but he's a little bit more open because he's sitting with Tucker right now. So I'm just going to pull that up right now. But before I do, of course, I have to show you the Sold Not For Sale t-shirt on the I Am Coach Colin website. The greatest anti-establishment brand in the world. The next shirt I have to show you is the certified pure blood shirt for those of you that survived the pandemic untainted and unscathed and unfazed by what they tried to throw at us all. That is your certificate of achievement. And my personal favorite, the Public Enemy #1 shirt. If you do not know who this man is, because so many people in the comments ask who it is, Google the World Economic Forum, Google Agenda 2030, Google You Will Own Nothing and Be Happy, and you will understand very quickly why I branded that man as public enemy number one. If you want 10% off of anything you just saw, all you got to do is put in the discount code area, I am Coach Colin. That's one L in the name Colin. All capital letters, all one word, gets you 10% off. And if you've already decided to do that with us, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're much appreciated. Now let's get into this clip.
She'll answer 3 parts about it I love. She comes up and says, what are your opinions on the LGBT community? First, you question the premise of the question itself. How is it a community? Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, as you say. That's not a community. I agree with that. Second, you're completely calm and you explain yourself. And third, you say, what's your opinion?
Yeah.
And you throw it back to her. But to the first thing, trans is fundamentally in tension with gay. I have not heard anybody say that in public. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just starting with the L and the G. Most lesbians don't like gay men and vice versa. But then now you keep adding.
I don't think you can say that. It's too true.
And you sort of like further start playing this out.
Wait.
Trans is this totally weird separate thing. That's like, so like, you're just like mashing this like alphabet soup just to create an us versus them destruction of modern order.
Sorry, I should say I someone in the studio is nodding. Who would know? What you just said is true.
It's the truth. I mean, really. And so, you know, the truth is, let's just take, I mean, we could have a lot of fun with this one, but just take some of the suppositions here and see if this logically makes sense, right? Like one of the suppositions in the gay rights movement, which, you know, I'm totally open to this, but it's just partly of how we created gay rights in this country, is that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born, even though there is no gay gene. Now, if you make it one movement, the LGBT movement, that's the same movement that also now says that your own sex is completely fluid over the course of your life, even though there is a definitive sex chromosome. Like, you can't believe these two things at the same time. They're fundamentally
nonsensical.
It's nonsensical. And so that's what it reveals what's going on, Tucker, is that these are cult-like belief systems, right? Because if it's a religious cult, then you don't have any obligation to logic if you're subscribing to a religion. And the worst religions are the ones that fail to recognize themselves as religions. I think religion can be a great thing. You and I are both pro-religion, pro-faith, if we recognize that we're actually exercising faith. But the most dangerous religions of all are those that claim to be secular but are actually religious in their conviction. And one of the ways you can smoke out that it's a religion is just these inherent tensions. Then you give it a flag, then you give it a symbology, you give it an idol. The first idol was not good enough, the rainbow flag. Then they had to make the trans flag, the upgraded version, the golden idol. They started with the silver one. And so this is what this is about, is a form of idolatry in the trans flag that is a symbol of a broader religious conviction. It's kind of the same thing you see in the climate movement, actually. Is like, I kind of enjoy this because you get to the bottom of what's going on by exposing the illogic of it. Right? Like on the climate, there's a parallel for what's going on with LGBT with climate. You think two different issues. What are you talking about? Well, the same people who are antithetical to carbon emissions here in the United States are perfectly fine with shifting those carbon emissions to China, even though it was supposedly global warming that we were addressing. Or the same people who are hostile to carbon emissions are also hostile to nuclear energy, which is the most productive form of carbon-free energy production known to man. Again, you can't believe both of those things at once unless you're subscribing to a broader religious worldview. And I think that religion is actually, it's the same religion, whether it relates to the climate dogma, whether it relates to LGBTQIA plus-ism, whether it relates to racial wokeism. It's a broader vision that defines itself in opposition to the American vision, to the American way of life, that says we are individuals who are members of these units we call families which are embedded in the substructure of this thing we call a nation, and a nation which exists under the broader blessing of God. Individual, family, nation, God. That is one worldview. And the thing we're describing here is an alternative worldview grounded in race, in gender, in sexuality, in climate. And one of the things that I feel for some of the people who subscribe to this religion, I somewhat felt for this woman, right? She wasn't, there are others like her. There's another one actually at the Iowa State Fair who had similar beliefs that did not comport him or her or they self, whatever this individual was, in the same civil manner that this woman did. He had a cowbell and it was ringing and was antithetical to having conversation. This woman, at least having a conversation, I kind of felt for her because what I saw in her eyes was she's not an evil person who's trying to be a crusader for some faith to put the other side out of business. Those people exist. She was just lost, actually. Right? I don't know if it was harder to see on the camera, but I was face to face with her. And when I see that, it's why I also thanked her. I said, thank you for being civil in your exchange. And I'll give you the same courtesy in return. I mean, she was early 20s, best my guess. She's lost. There's a void there.
Yeah.
Right? So I asked her the question back. There's a blank stare you get in a response. It's almost the same blank stare as if I ask most young people on a given day, what does it mean to be American? It's that same blank stare. That's the void. It's like a deer in the headlights. And I think that this is our moment, our duty, our job as leaders. It's the job of the next U.S. president, might be the most important one of all, to fill that void with an answer to the question of what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be an individual rather than riding a tectonic plate of group identity? What does it mean to be a member of a family, a nuclear family with a mother and a father that by definition brought you into this world? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? Not some nebulous, vague global citizen fighting climate change. No, but a citizen of this nation on this land with these ideals. What does it mean to believe in God, to be a nation under God? I think that's our moment.
Man, I like it. The way he broke it down, it was a really interesting breakdown, and it made perfect sense. And then the correlation to that and the climate change mob as well makes perfect sense. And also he connected that both of these things are directed towards breaking down the way of life that we currently have. And then I would add to that even breaking down the nuclear family, because, not the climate change, but a lot of that alphabet community, they do not like the nuclear family. And when Vivek was just saying, he goes individual, individual, family, nation, God, like the levels. If you take away the nuclear family, as they're trying to do, or trying to claim that it's like an outdated concept, it messes up that hierarchy. If you thought of it like a structure, you're taking out not quite the foundation, because it's the individual. It's like they, for lack of a better term, they grab hold of the individual and destroy the family. So now it's like you have hold of the foundation of that. You're knocking out one of the main pillars. The rest of it can come crumbling. And the next thing you know, you're too far because you don't have the proper steps. You're too far from God. And then once you're far from God, anything can really infiltrate your life pretty negatively. My opinion, of course, that's just me. If you don't believe in God, all good. Have fun. Even though you don't go anywhere, you just turn off. Everything's black. I guess have fun with that. I don't know. I'm going to paradise myself. But yeah, great breakdown. Great break. I'm telling you guys, by the time this is up, I'm hoping that I have found a proper link to put in a description so you guys can see it, because if I'm looking at this properly, from about 18 minutes until about 34 minutes, he gives such a great breakdown of the situation going on between Russia and Ukraine, how to break away from China and subdue that adversary. He touches on the Taiwan situation, because if you don't know, Taiwan makes all the superconductors that are needed for phones and all the amazing electronics that we have today. Superconductors are just a huge part of it. Taiwan makes them all, so it's the reason why China wants Taiwan, because it's a whole thing. But the way he breaks it down, and the way he talks about the steps that we would have that he would have to take as president in order to straighten all that out is fantastic. And again, if he doesn't become president, which more than likely won't, because Trump, unless something happens to Trump, if he's the vice president, him and Trump are just incredible. Like, I'm fully decided. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. He showed so much intelligence in this interview. It's 45 minutes. It's a great interview. And let me know what you think about how he just broke down the alphabet community there, and then the climate change. Like, he really addressed wokeism just now and the inconsistencies that they have. And the best thing that he said, I think, is when you're in a cult, you have no obligation to logic. And if you look at the things that are going on and you keep that in mind, it starts to make a lot of sense. And then the last thing I would point out, with the clip that I showed you at the beginning to this clip now, imagine if he, and this is just for anybody, when you're trying to talk to somebody, when you're trying to converse, when you're trying to debate, imagine if he had said to that young girl, if he had said the response he said to Tucker to that young girl, what would have happened? He would have got branded as transphobic. He would have been misogynistic. He would have been, oppressive, offensive, everything you can think of. But instead, he had this well thought out, very civil response, and nothing really came of that. Nothing from the left, nothing for people to brand him as. And I only bring that up to say, like, there's certain ways that you can go about speaking your argument to people. It doesn't always have to be so combative. It doesn't always have to be so belligerent. It doesn't always have to be so blunt. Sometimes when you give a really well thought out answer, it holds more weight. Because like he said, a void needs to be filled with those young people. And it's so true. I've talked about mass formation a few times on this podcast. And the one thing that helps mass formation along is that the people, the masses, they have a void to fill. They're lonely, they're sad, they're detached, they're isolated. And then whatever the thing is fills that void for them. It becomes their religion. It becomes their cult. It becomes their paradise, their heaven. It becomes everything. And that's why you see these people dig their heels in the sand so deeply, because it becomes everything. It's the only thing they have. And imagine if everybody had the void filled. I know for myself, just the void filled with a good family. And I know some people have that, but then they're missing other things. But if you could really fill it, like Vivek was saying, with what it means to be a citizen of this nation, right? Instead of, like, I like how he said this nation instead of global citizen, because you'll notice the type of people who talk about being global citizens, like, look into that. I remember the first person I heard say that was Obama, and I was like, that's interesting. I'm like, what is that? Like, why is he calling himself a global citizen? You don't want to do that. Like Elon Musk said, you don't want too much communication between nations. You don't want too much compromise. You want things divided up a little bit. You really do. Not so much that you're dividing and conquering, but like, that country should, handle itself. This country should handle itself. That country should handle itself. You start looking at yourself as global. You start taking your eyes off the prize, and the prize should be your homeland for the most part, Yeah, very interesting. Check out this podcast. Definitely check it out. This I'm gonna make sure that there's a link in the description. All right. Let me know what you think in the description, in the comments, what you think of Vivek, what you think of what he's saying, what you think of the woke mob and the inconsistencies that he pointed out. And if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe. If you haven't liked it already, like it. Other than that, I'm out.